Important part of Richplanet, because the information that I've been able to present, most of it comes from people who contact me.
Yeah, so, and you know, and if we get things wrong, and I get things wrong, I prefer to be corrected so I can improve what I've got. You know, and as I've said, I'm a tutor for the OU, so I have to work with students to help them improve work. And you know, they sometimes point out my errors if I've marked them down for something, and
including the blue fleece.
Yes, indeed. You know, so I've got to correct that one in some way. So.
Right. All right then, Andrew. Thanks very much again. And remember, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see. I'm Richard D. Hall. Good night. Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. This is the last show in the current series. Hopefully I'll be making more shows in the latter part of 2018. Today I'm putting out the details of the next Richplanet UK tour starting in April next year, 2018, which you can find out about from this link. Now, as you may know, I've produced over 14 hours of documentaries about Madeleine McCann, and I always look for new information and evidence. I recently received a very interesting email from a particularly hawk-eyed viewer. Let me explain. The Madeleine case broke in May 2007. Her parents say that the 3-year-old was abducted. Many people do not believe this and also believe that Madeleine died and that the death was concealed. If the death was covered up, it presumably was covered up for a reason. These questions have been the source of much debate and speculation. Assuming she died, how did she die and why was it covered up? Now, in 2010, 3 years after the events, a video was released by Madeleine's godfather, John Corner. Note, the video was not released by the McCanns themselves. This video contained 3 images of Madeleine which had not been released previously. One of the images was particularly disturbing for many people. The image shows Madeleine wearing a gold pearl necklace, a hair bead, eyeshadow, lipstick and eyeliner. Kate McCann has stated that the photo was the result of Madeleine playing with her mummy's makeup. Many people think this is a lie and that Madeleine could not have applied this makeup herself. The image looks like it may have been taken while on holiday because it features a Mediterranean-style cream-coloured stucco textured wall found commonly on the Algarve. The length of Madeleine's hair in this image appears to be identical to the length of her hair when she went missing. Now, the McCann's holiday photos in general are a very controversial subject, and you'd need to watch my 3rd Madeleine film entitled When Madeleine Died? To learn more. But in summary, there is a considerable school of thought that believes a photograph which the McCanns say was the last photograph ever taken of Madeleine, which they say was taken on the afternoon of the disappearance, was in fact taken 4 days before she was reported missing, indicating that she may have died well before she was actually reported missing. So, if the makeup photograph was taken during the 2007 Praia de Luz holiday, is it possible that it was taken after the official last photograph, perhaps just before Madeleine died or went missing? If this is the case, then if the location where the photograph was taken could be identified, it might provide clues about what really happened to Madeleine. Was the makeup photo the last photograph taken of Madeleine seen alive? And can it provide a clue about how and where Madeleine may have died? So on to the new discovery. If we look carefully, just to the side of Madeleine's left temple, we see a dark-coloured object which appears to be mounted on the wall. There has been much discussion about what this could be. The Richplanet viewer wrote, "When you showed the picture of Madeleine with blue makeup surrounding her eyes, you mentioned the lamp holder. I immediately thought this is a thermometer. I think I found the kind of thermometer. Especially the minus symbol on the right side near the -20 is quite striking." Here is a comparison of the type of thermometer the viewer is referring to and the object on the wall behind Madeleine. I think you'll agree it is a probable match and is quite a distinctive piece of evidence. So I am appealing today if anyone has knowledge about where these types of thermometer may have been installed. Remember, this is in 2007 and the likely location is in the Algarve, possibly in or near Praia de Luz. If you can recall seeing this type of thermometer on that coloured textured background or have photographs, please get in touch. It could lead to a major breakthrough. Do you recall a few weeks ago the supposed controversy over the plastic politician Priti Patel and her unauthorised discussions with Israeli officials while on holiday in August? Theresa May is supposed to have found out about these unauthorised meetings after watching it reported on the BBC on the 3rd of November. Following this, May then summoned Plastic Patel to number 10 Downing Street, and after having words, the plastic politician was forced to resign. If you believe that crock of shit, you really will believe anything. Just to be clear, I'm not saying Patel did not speak to Israeli officials. I am saying I don't believe her meetings were not pre-planned by authorities, possibly intelligence agencies on both sides. A British MP talking to senior Israeli officials without any permission from the British government is like Wayne Rooney turning up for a training session with Sunderland without any permission from his current club Everton. And the Sunderland manager doesn't think it odd that Rooney is training with his players without his permission. It is one of the most blatant psyops I have seen in recent months. Now, a psyop could be described as a piece of PR that has been invented or orchestrated for some hidden political agenda. But why would they do this, Richard? Let me explain. There is a school of thought that the British government and many senior British politicians are strongly influenced by the Israeli agenda, and that Britain can therefore be described as a political poodle of Israel and of the United States for that matter. What better way to attempt to dispel such annoying facts than by orchestrating a public display of disapproval against one of those strongly influenced British politicians for collaborating with the Israelis behind the British government's back? If you believe the story on face value, you are very gullible. Plastic Patel is a career politician and has worked in the highly honourable profession of PR. Yes, PR, the profession where the truth doesn't matter and spin and often outright lies are the name of the game. In this role, Patel worked to protect the reputation of a tobacco company, who were involved in some very dodgy business practices. Plastic Patel was a prominent Vote Leave campaigner during Brexit. But I wonder, was Leave really her opinion? Or was she just helping out with the PR? And I wonder whether she was paid to act out this most recent, ridiculous, blatant psyop. So keep your eyes peeled for the next piece of preposterous PR from the plastic politician, Priti Patel. Now, speaking of Brexit, I have read that people who have made certain investments have had poor returns on their money, and that is being blamed on Brexit. Also, less people have been able to move home due to a depressed housing situation, and this is being blamed on Brexit. The price of food is going up. This is being blamed on Brexit. The other day my van broke down. This was due to substandard vehicle servicing. Blamed on Brexit. I had 3 pints of beer the other night and woke up with a hangover. This was because I did not eat enough food due to fear of price increases, entirely brought on by Brexit. This morning I stood in a dog turd. This was obviously caused by Brexit because the price of the little polythene dog shit bags has gone up, causing more dog shit on the streets. The other day I lifted up my left buttock to let out what I thought was going to be just a very stiff fart. But I'd forgotten all about my irritable bowel syndrome, and what emerged was much more than just a very stiff fart. This was undoubtedly caused by Brexit. I lost my phone. That was due to Brexit. I fell off a ladder. Brexit! In fact, anything at all now can officially be blamed on Brexit. Let's think about this objectively. A country is just a smaller version of the world. There is no reason in theory why any country could not become autonomous from the rest of the world. Autonomy over its resources, autonomy over its currency, autonomy over its workforce, autonomy over its laws, and still function normally like the rest of the world does. Imagine, for example, that suddenly the rest of the world other than Britain didn't exist. The rest of the world just vanishes overnight. What would happen? I'm sure we would survive. And who's to say that eventually we'd not be better off than we were before? But Brexit isn't even about autonomy. We currently trade with dozens of nations outside of the EU. And after Brexit, we will continue to trade with all of the nations within the EU. The dogma that we are somehow worse off because of Brexit is down to your own psychological attitude. Let me draw an analogy. If you're going to move house to get away from a totally annoying neighbour, it might cost you money in the short term, but you're not moving house to try and make a short-term financial gain. You're moving house out of principle, which is above your financial interest. If you're the sort of person that only does things for money, then you're one sad individual. And in any event, when you do move house, how do you know whether you're going to be worse or better off in the long run? The future depends on actions, not on opinion. All that said, one thing I don't like about Brexit is it masks some of the real issues we face. After Brexit, we still have a system in the UK which is controlled and manipulated by hidden institutions which do not serve the people of the country. If we do become more autonomous due to Brexit, we cannot achieve much unless we remove the banks, get rid of every MP, get rid of the main political parties, remove all the government agencies, replace the media, and redesign the way our currency is issued. We need to start from scratch, and Brexit will not do that. Well, it's a start, Richard. Is it really? I'll keep campaigning for all of the above, whatever happens. And for God's sake, stop blaming everything on Brexit. It's just one more piece of PR from those who are trying to reverse the Brexit decision. It would not surprise me at all that at some time in the future, if some sort of disaster or collapse is orchestrated in an attempt to get everyone who voted for Brexit to regret their decision so it can ultimately be reversed. So just bear all this in mind when you're watching the shit on your lie box. Now, the Richplanet 2018 tour starts in Glasgow on the 19th of April, and I'll be visiting 11 further venues throughout the UK, finishing on the 5th of May in Belfast. So I hope to see you at one of the shows. Thanks to everyone for watching the 2017 series and for all your emails and knowledge that you have sent me. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm not Richard D. Hall, but on today's programme I'm going to be talking to Richard D. Hall. Welcome, Richard.
Thanks for inviting me back, Andrew.
You're very welcome, and we'll explain why we're doing this a bit later on as we go through our chat here. And Richard, we're going to do a little bit of a sort of special program today, and we'll come to the reason later on. And I think we're just sort of going to dive straight in, really, rather than sort of beat around the bush, and just sort of go back to your school days and what sort of things you were interested in at school, and what how that panned out for you.
Yes, predominantly I was interested in scientific subjects. Physics, probably my favourite subject at school. I had a strong interest in electronics and computers. I was also very interested in sport. I played a lot of football. I decided to do electrical engineering as a career choice. Obviously that took me to university. I went to a bog standard comprehensive before that. Now, one thing I found out when I was researching which university to go to, it was that companies in engineering would offer scholarship or sponsorship, right? So I decided that I didn't want to be a poor student if this money was available. So in order to increase my chances of getting a sponsorship, I applied to 10 different companies, all household names, GEC, British Rail, NEI Parsons, and I was lucky enough to actually get a sponsorship to go to university. So what that means is you take a year out after your A-levels and you spend a year working in industry, which I did. And then, so in those days, the local authority gave you a grant.
Yep.
Now, young people these days going to university might not even know what that means.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
This is where the government, your local authority, gives you money for your tuition fees and to live off, right? So that was approximately, it was just over £2,000 a year. This is in the late 1980s, a gift from the local authority. But not only that, because I was involved with this company, they gave me a scholarship, which I was very lucky to get. So as I recall, it was £250 a term, right? Which is £25 a week on top of your £700 a term. So, and then in the summer holidays, I would go and work for this company. So I was able to, in my year out, I was able to save up enough money to buy a car. So I came out of university with more money than when I went in. Now just compare that
today,
with what we have today.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm making this point is because we need to consider that this is not an accident with education and the funding of education. In my opinion, it's not an accident, the fact that students have to get into debt the day they leave school.
Yes.
It's just despicable, and we've got Tony Blair and others to thank for that, or for facilitating that.
Yes, yes.
And I think it's all planned as a tool of control to make sure that you are a debt slave from the day you leave school.
I think also there's another agenda as well. I'm not going to dwell on this too long, but how corporate influence gets into universities more. You and I have a very similar background. I didn't do a sponsorship, but apart from that, pretty similar to what you said. And for example, I do tuition for the Open University. We go and use Nottingham Trent facilities, and one of their buildings I notice has Toyota, plastered on it. So you're getting corporate influence directly into the universities now, which is, makes it completely different to when you and I went through university. So you I remember we had a conversation a while ago about how you stayed in halls for 3 years, didn't you, and things like that, because it was much more economical and good standard of food and things like that.
Well, everyone kept saying to me, "Oh, you've got to live in the real world. You've got to go and live in a cold, drafty house." And I would say, why? Because I think it was around about £400 a term, and for that you got, I think it was 16 meals a week, so you hardly had to buy any food. So you had £300 left of your grant, and then I had £250 on top of that. So I had about 50 odd quid a week spending money, right? So why can't it be like that now? There's no reason why it can't be.
Not really.
It's all been engineered to be like that.
Yeah.
I took the easy path, and then my final 2 years, I got a room on the top floor of the halls of residence. I had a view of Newcastle upon Tyne. What's wrong with that? I had a great time at university. But I think now, because the Labour government of 1997, they changed it all, and they encouraged more people to go to university. Now, a lot of people say that that's a great thing. Well, maybe it is, but I do think there's a lot of toilet paper degrees being given out now that they're there, in my opinion, to facilitate the debt.
Yes, yes.
To attract people to university, to get them in debt.
Yeah.
Are they really learning useful things on every university course?
Yes.
Is every university course really justified?
That's
Do
right.
we really need to spend to that particular age in education? I know that maybe sound a little bit elitist, or well, you went, Richard, why can't everyone go?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I take that point. Everyone should be allowed to find themselves in education or what have you. But I do think that the situation's been engineered deliberately because they want slaves coming out of university. They don't want enlightened individuals.
It's much less geared towards, critical thinking, developing higher thinking, what you might call higher thinking skills, and academic sort of pursuits. It's more oriented towards corporate interests, as I was saying earlier on. And I mean, I used to see students who were doing a degree in retail buying, so I wonder what do they do in retail buying degree, for 3 years. But hey, maybe there are things I don't know about in that regard. So you came out of university, and I believe you did some work experience as well. I think you had a 4-year course altogether, including a year in work?
Yeah, well, 131, so it's 5 in total.
I see.
So you have a job at the end of it already because the company who sponsored you. So I didn't have to find a job either.
No.
So I was very lucky, really, in that regard. And I worked for 14 years in that career, and then eventually left to become self-employed. Not anything to do with these alternative subjects. Completely. Just electronics, computer repairs, and web design.
So Richard, we talked previously about how I'd said, and other people have said to me how good you are at explaining things, and you've got a very sort of very good way of putting things concisely, succinctly, and a way that's clearly understandable. And I assumed in the past that you'd actually done some type of teacher training or something like that, which is what I've done. I have not done a full teaching qualification, but I did do some basic training. And but that's not the case, is it? Because you went into it from a different route, didn't you? So if you could talk about that.
At my work, I was very much a technical person. So I shied away from any lecturing or tutoring or anything like that. I wrote a lot of software. I was involved in detailed electronics for a whole host of different products used in power stations and on motorways and that kind of thing. So I was always a troubleshooter and a design engineer. Wasn't interested in speaking in public, like I say. Now, what happened around about the year 2000, I was getting a little bit bored of my career in engineering. I felt that I did have other talents and I just wanted to test the water. So what I did was I enrolled on a course at Newcastle College in acting, in amateur dramatics. So this was a course that I did in my spare time. I was still working full time. It was every Saturday for a whole day for 6 months. So 9 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock at night. And you would write scripts and do training exercises in drama. And I finished that, and then I got involved in a theatre company who would put plays on in Newcastle upon Tyne at the Live Theatre and other theatres. So I appeared in probably 5 or 6 theatre plays, one of which I played Death in Terry Pratchett's Mort.
Yep.
I played Cannon Throbbing in an Alan Bennett play, this sort of farce. The reason why I did this is because I would think to myself, well, I'm in my mid-30s now. Am I going to be doing this for another 30, 40 years in engineering? I just wanted to experiment with other things. And I became interested particularly in comedy, because some of those plays were comedic, and a couple of the other plays that I was in, they were written by local Geordie writers, and they were full of Geordie humour, which I really loved. And humour does creep into Richplanet,
of course,
as you know.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about Viz as well, because I mean, Viz was kind of going, and that was sort of, a lot of that was Geordie-based humour, wasn't it? There was a sort of, yeah. So
before I even realised that there was cover-ups going on in the world.
Yes.
So I'd be in my mid-30s. I became interested in comedy, and I actually developed a stand-up act. And I did, I think, 6 gigs. I did a couple of gigs where I was supporting other comedians, right? Now, what happened then was I got into trouble at work, because some people at work found out that I'd develop this character, and I could do like entertain an audience with this particular character. So they asked me to do a turn at the Works Christmas party. So
Yep.
this is an engineering company. You've got 200 people there in a working men's club, and I come on as my character act, and all I do is lay into the directors of the company, right? Doing impersonations of them, and really kind of slightly crude jokes about one particular director who I couldn't stand, who happened to be my boss. So that really, I think, was the reason why they got rid of me out of that company. Albeit they didn't admit that's why.
They couldn't have really done anything legally, could they? You know, probably.
In my opinion, they fabricated a redundancy situation to get rid of me because they thought that I was undermining my boss, who, for my own reasons, I couldn't stand the guy. Right? He had no technical knowledge. He was a salesman, and he was such a good target for humour. I'll not go into the joke. I've got it all on film. That particular gig that I did, I've got it all on film. Maybe one day I'll show it. So that really pushed me out of engineering.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was kind of like an ejector seat for you.
It was an ejector seat. Yeah. Absolutely, it was. But it was maybe a good thing now.
Because then you went on and you became self-employed, that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, so I dropped all of that interest in comedy and in acting to concentrate on a computer repair business and web design, and I did that for maybe 5 years, and then it was round about 2007 that I started getting more interested in the subject of UFOs.
Because, I mean, we mentioned earlier that you had a similar path to me, because you discovered the Disclosure Project, Stephen Gray's Disclosure Project. People can research that if they're not familiar. And I think you also discovered that around the same time I did, didn't you? That was...
A little bit later, probably about 2005, 2006.
When it was all done, the CIA, one of the CIA men told the people they were now sworn to secrecy, that this meeting never happened and this event never happened. When I asked him why, I thought it was probably just a stealth bomber at the time, he says, well, this is the first time that we have recorded radar data on a UFO, and these guys are going to get all excited, drooling over all this data. I said, well, you're going to tell the public about it? And he says, no, we don't tell the public about this. It would panic the public. He says, we're going to go back and study this.
And you were actually involved in the Disclosure Project.
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I'd started showing this video around women's institute groups and various other groups, you know, and that's how I got involved. But so that was about 2006 sort of time frame. And then, of course, you'd previously we talked about you discovering the story of Bob Lazar back in the 90s, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, because the Bob Lazar story is there's a lot of technical detail in there. Whether you believe it or not is another issue. Whether you think Bob Lazar is a complete shill, or whether you think he's the genuine thing. And of course, the word Bob Lazar became one of my catchphrases.
The next verse I've picked out is rather peculiar. I'd be interested to know from viewers what on earth the Bible is talking about here. Then I turned and lifted up mine eyes and looked, and behold, a flying roll. And he said unto me, what seest thou? And I answered, I see a flying roll. The length thereof is 20 cubits, and the breadth thereof 10 cubits. So a flying roll, whatever that might be, 20 cubits, which is 35 feet long, and 10 cubits, which is 18 feet wide. 35 feet is slightly longer than the average house, and 18 feet is the length of a large living room. This is very bizarre, or as I sometimes like to say, it's Bob Lazar. What on earth could the Bible possibly be referring to here? Answers on a postcard to richplanet.net, P.O. Box, Bob Lazar.
Because he is a real enigma, and he does split the world of ufology in two. Now, I personally believe that he saw something which was classified. As Grant Cameron, who I respect a lot, a UFO researcher, he thinks that Lazar was taken into the program and shown the technology so that he could then be later discredited.
Yes.
Right? So that he does believe that Lazar saw something genuine. Obviously, you've got people like Stanton Friedman who reject that. right? It's a very contentious subject, but I recently saw a video of Bob Lazar in a court, which was clearly recorded in the late 90s, sorry, in the late 80s, early 90s, and the judge is reading out his employment history, and he says, yes, you worked for the Navy or Naval Intelligence.
I have reviewed the material from Mark Fierro, from Mr. Bilbray's office. I'm impressed with all of that. I note that although it doesn't show a lot of income, we do have a W-2 form of record that shows that he worked for the United States Department of Naval Intelligence.
Very important point.
Now, he's not going to lie about that in court to a judge, right? So I think that's good evidence that Lazar was employed by the military in some degree, right? Which Stanton Friedman would refute. But I think Lazar was working at Area 51.
I've also studied the Lazar story quite a bit, and I felt that, like you, that he described such a lot of technical detail, and the way that he presented that, he says things like, well, I don't care if you believe me or not. In fact, I'd rather you didn't believe me, because it makes my life easier if you don't believe me. Yeah. And that to me was sort of quite convincing, but the thing that I wasn't convinced about was this element 115 business. I thought the element 115 could well have been disinformation. That was my thoughts on that, but we're not going to dwell on that too long. So you'd got...
Well, it was the technical element of that as an engineer. It was just such a mind-blowing explanation as to how this UFO would defy gravity. I thought, well, is there something to that? And I researched it and researched it and researched it, and I couldn't find anything that would absolutely say, well, it's all nonsense. There seemed to be far too much detail, and Bob Lazar's not profited from it. No. He's not done the lecture circuit. He went back to building his hydrogen-powered car and his physics website where he's supplying physics equipment. So he didn't do it to write a book or make a film or get famous.
I mean, he hasn't gone around the world or around America inventing all these different money-making initiatives like Stephen Greer has, for example. Okay, so that, you know, you'd already got that sort of knowledge of the Lazar case, and you knew there was something in the UFO phenomenon. Then you'd found the Disclosure Project, and then I think you know, because you were doing websites anyway, and I think the next step then was you created this website or something. Tell me more about that. Yeah, that's right.
So I was listening to a lot of coast-to-coast interviews. For those who don't know, this is an American radio show which you can get in the UK online. And for me, at that time, in 2006, 2007, some of the shows were fantastic.
Yes.
I don't have as much respect for it now. I don't know whether that's because I've changed or it's changed. But I was listening to a lot of the UFO shows, and I was fascinated by a lot of the cases. And I wanted to create a website to put it all across and perhaps explain some of the cases. So I did that, and I thought, well, I need a name for this website. It's all been designed by me, so it needs to have my name in it.
Yeah.
I thought Rich, well, it's about the planet, Richplanet. So I registered the domain name. So this really is the start of Richplanet. If you go online, you'll see the domain name was registered on the 31st of December, 2007.
And we were talking about this earlier, weren't you? So, you know, you're sat there, New Year's Eve, you know.
Yeah. That shows what a sad bastard I was, that I'm registering a domain name for a UFO website on New Year's Eve.
There you go.
So, yes. So that really is the launch date of Richplanet, because I put the website up not long after I'd registered the domain name. So that's why we're doing this interview. Because
that's right, it's the 10th anniversary. We're very nearly there now, aren't we, when this goes out. So you've got the Richplanet website set up, and I think the next thing then, we were talking earlier as well, you start to make short videos to camera or something?
Yeah. So on that website, I would put little short video clips, and I think I made an hour-long video of me explaining the subject of UFOs. And then in April that year, 2008, that's when the MOD started to release its so-called UFO files.
And some of those Rendlesham documents came out, didn't they? And I remember looking at those, and they had about 6 copies of the Holt memo in one of the PDF files, exactly the same. I thought, yeah.
They're not releasing secret information or top secret information, but nevertheless, it was a talking point on the local radio. So I phoned up Radio Newcastle. I said, well, I've got anyone who wants to find out more about UFOs, because they had Nick Pope on. I've set up a website, and then so I started getting hits because I'd phoned in the radio show, and then they invited me on, and this was a morning show on Radio Newcastle, so I got used to talking about the subject then. And then in the summer of 2008, that was when Edge Media, who had just set up their alternative TV channel on the Sky platform, they were looking for someone to present information about UFOs. So they were going through the internet looking for people, and they found my website and they contacted me. So I sent them my video and they said, that's great, it's just what we want. And I said, well, I'll make some more. And then that was when I went and made the Robert Hall documentary.
And that was the Gateshead Grey, wasn't it, that you did? So that was actually the first kind of, you know, to use the jargon, of feature-length documentary, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah. And the Robert Hall documentary, you can go online and watch it. It's called The Gateshead Grey. I investigated the claims of an elderly gentleman who claimed that he'd actually seen a group of extraterrestrials in his street land in a flying saucer and all the rest of it. Now, I was fascinated by his account. I don't know whether it happened or not, but the point of the documentary was to follow my quest to find supporting evidence.
Yes, yes.
Right.
And that was 1940, that incident, wasn't it?
Yeah.
About 3 days later, things took an even more bizarre twist. In the morning, Robert was going to the local shop for his father's newspaper.
Then I went to this shop, Mona Hollands, to get my father's paper. A grey come after us up the back lane. I run like out. Grey was on us like a shot, and I was a hell of a good runner. And now, as I screamed, my uncle only smashed its head in with a shovel. And he says, come on, I've never seen out like it. And he says, get Sergeant Brooks on Southwell Road. He'd be just coming off duty now. So I run to Southwell Road and Sergeant Brooks come along. I says, he's killed it, he's killed it. He says, kill what? And he went for his truncheon and had the old-fashioned police mark on, and he come around the corner. He said, by God, and he was crossing his son praying. He says, I've never seen out like it. They put it on a coal sack and pulled it into the backyard, into the coal place is still there to this day. They pulled it into there. You see, you get yourself away home. I says, no, I've been telling you the damn truth. There is your proof. Get yourself away home, Robert. I says, no, I'm standing here.
Absolutely incredible. Robert's uncle, Ernie Wren, had killed the creature with a coal shovel.
This is the precise spot where the alien was hit over the head with the shovel. Now, I probably wouldn't make such a documentary now. There's probably not enough strong evidence for me to make it now. The Richplanet is a lot more evidence-based now.
Yes.
I started off believing that most people tell the truth.
Yes.
I now come from the viewpoint that most people in the subjects that we are involved with don't tell the truth.
Yes.
You can't believe anything anyone says. You really have to find good supporting evidence if you're going to believe somebody, and that's what I've learned on this journey.
Yes.
I'm not saying that Robert Hall didn't experience that. I actually don't know. I feel the same way. We've had a similar sort of path, I think. But I think the thing we discussed before was with that Robert Hall case is that you did find a little bit of evidence in terms of some of the reactions of people, didn't you? And the people that you sort of went to see, other than Robert. Yeah, there was certainly some strange behaviour by his neighbours, who it appeared to me had been told not to speak about what happened. Now, I don't really know what did happen, but I do think something happened there. One of his famous claims is that he states that he invented the phrase "little green men," and he claims that he didn't say "little green men." He said a Chronicle news reporter came to his house, wanted his story, and he said, "Well, they were little grey men," and because he had a Geordie accent, the reporters thought he said "little green men." So that phrase "little green men" is come about because people can't understand Geordie. That was his claim. And he's adamant about it. This is in 1940. And if you look at all of the other claims of little green men, they generally come after 1940.
Interesting.
So I think you may be right there.
Interesting. So that was the first film, and I think, was it before or after then that you did a couple of shows with Theo Chalmers? Or
yes, well, at that time, when I got involved with Edge Media Television, Theo had a very good show which was called On the Edge, which discussed 9/11, medical cover-ups, a lot of different issues, very important issues, and my show usually followed his show. So I wanted to make a similar show and have guests on that show and do an interview type show, but I wanted to make it different to his show.
Yeah.
So his show was very serious, cutting edge show. So I wanted to make mine a little bit more light-hearted, just to sort of a bit of light relief from the seriousness of the show that went before. So that's why I set the thing in a spaceship. That's why I introduced...
So that's what you sort of developed this concept of the Richplanet starship for your program to make it look different and feel different, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I changed the name from Richplanet to Richplanet Starship, and then I did, you know, we're going to beam up the guests, which was funny for the first few, but obviously you know, a bit corny.
You know, my son, he was very impressed that I suddenly materialised on the screen in your spaceship.
His website speaks for itself. Checktheevidence.com. So without further ado, let's activate the teleporter and get him beamed up onto the ship. It's Andrew Johnson. Welcome, Andrew.
And I think I was the top voted best beam up or something. So I did this fetal position or something.
So maybe we can replay that.
Yeah.
All right. And yeah, just to mention the humour element of it. Obviously, I do. The thing about the show is that I didn't want it to be pigeonholed. If you watch mainstream television, you know what you're watching. You know if you're watching a comedy show or a current affairs show or a Hollywood film. I don't want anyone to know what's going on Richplanet. I want to be able to put humour in there, but I also want to have extremely serious subjects like the Madeleine McCann issue.
Yes,
right? So I don't want to be pigeonholed. I don't want any limits on my freedom of what I can make or tell jokes about. In entertainment, keep the public entertainment below a 6th grade level. In the media, keep the adult public attention diverted from the real social issues and captivated by matters of no real importance. Are we not seeing this on our TV screens every day with the barrage of television shows of no real importance? For example, the plethora of dancing shows. Strictly Dancing, Ballroom Dancing, Disco Dancing, Dancing at Night, Dancing on Ice, and the soon-to-be-launched Dancing on Shite, where the contestants will hopefully fall flat on their abundantly maked-up faces. Of course, these shows are really not dancing competitions. The contestants' rippling bodies strut about, wiggling their bottoms in kinky, sexually explicit outfits, like prostitutes competing for your attention in a sleazy strip joint. Just as some of our tabloid newspapers are actually soft porn mags, thinly disguised as newspapers, these TV shows are the same. They are soft porn shows, thinly disguised as dancing competitions. In the past, I remember the show Benny Hill, which was of course soft porn, thinly disguised as a comedy show. Now, on the Richplanet Starship, we have no objection at all to anybody wishing to spend their time watching pornography. We are not prudes. We are not the modern-day version of Mary Whitehouse. Just as long as those who insist on watching this tat understand exactly what it is they are glued to and why. As my physics teacher always used to say, the easiest person in the world to fool is yourself. Then we come on to the other area of no great importance, which is paraded on our TV screens every second of the day, programs about food. I don't know about you, but I'm no more interested in watching TV shows about eating food than I am in watching TV shows about having a dump. Although that probably would make a far more interesting show than the shit we are served up every day on our lie boxes. As Andrew Johnson said to me the other day, the BBC, making ignorance fashionable. Well, I think I'll just remain unfashionable if it's all the same to you.
Yeah.
And I remember probably around that time watching a very good video made by Rowan Atkinson called Rowan Atkinson's Guide to Visual Comedy, and this is explaining why jokes work and how visual humour works. And he's explaining that anything that your brain doesn't expect is funny, and then if something appears in the wrong place and then he opens the kitchen cupboard and he's sitting in the cupboard, or if something's the wrong size, or if something's out of place. So, and he explains what parody is and what satire is and how they work, and I was fascinated by that.
And there was, I think you told me about the story about the banana that he...
Yeah. If something's the wrong size, it's gonna look daft, and there's a banana about this big on the TV. Just little silly things like that, but that are visual jokes, which I have tried to use in Richplanet, because it makes people remember.
Absolutely, and
the
it has
subject.
in the right. If it's done in the right way, it has increases the impact and makes people. I think ultimately we're trying to make people think and use their critical thinking skills. And if you put a bit of comedy in there, it can kind of jolt people into that way of thinking, can't it? A bit more. So Richard, so you were doing Richplanet TV and Starship and so forth, and the other thing which I was very impressed with when I watched it was your Crop Circles documentary that you did with David Caton and others. Yeah. And so how did that come about?
Well, I was researching the phenomenon of animal mutilation, which if you want to watch all my films on there, go on the website and look it up. It's a phenomenon that most people haven't got a clue about. They don't know anything about it because it's kept out of the media. Many people allege that it is linked to the UFO phenomenon, and this is where animals are discovered with surgical holes in their body, with all of the blood exsanguinated, particular surgical injuries around the genitals and this kind of thing, and there is no rational explanation for it. So I made there are various groups in the UK that research this. David Caton was involved in one of them, and his name kept popping up on the internet when I was researching the subject, and I couldn't find any interviews that he'd done. And he's a former aircraft engineer, he's a very analytical person, and he'd been trampling the fields of Britain examining this phenomenon for many years, so I went to interview him, and he was really the focal point of the documentary Silent Killers that I made, and it was through him that I found out more about the whole crop circle issue.
And I advise people to watch that film because there is also this intelligence service connection that you uncovered really essentially, didn't you? And that I think is very important to consider.
I mean, exactly. A lot of people they might say, well, why are you making a documentary about crop circles? Well, even if you believe that they're all made by human beings using planks of wood, which that's another argument. What I uncovered in the documentary was the group that were making them, and all of the connections to MI5, and the information about who was funding them, information about how many they were making, and about how it could only have been done with funding from an organisation. So many connections to MI5. No doubt in my mind that the 99% of the man-made crop circles are being made by or sponsored by British intelligence, possibly linked with the US intelligence, I would say. Now that doesn't say that there isn't some more
exotic
method, and the film shows that as well. That there is definitely a small, tiny amount of crop circles that are not made with planks of wood, and that's really where the contention lies, and that's what this group was set up for, in order to hide the real phenomenon.
Yeah, absolutely. I
mean, you've done research into this as well, and you and I both now agree that even the exotic ones, they may be linked to covert technology that man has. Right, but that still doesn't rule out other possibilities.
No. And so was that one. And then the other one was you talked about the animal mutilation one, what you did with David as well, and that you made several follow-up programs to that, didn't you? 2-3 years ago and longer.
Yes, I've investigated a few animal mutilation cases myself, made documentaries about it, and when you get involved in it and you see it and you see the scope of it and the extent of it. These people who come out with, well, the whole thing is just a fear campaign in order to make aliens seem hostile, and it's all man-made. I could not hold my hand up and say who or what is behind the mutilations, and I don't think anyone can, other than those who were doing it. Right? It is genuinely unexplained, at least in the white world.
Yes.
I'm sure that those government agencies that are in the black know vastly more than we do.
Yes.
Whatever it is.
I'd agree.
But it's something where there's cover up on it for sure.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other big series that you did and have revisited and updated several times is the Wilson and Blackett investigations. So, you know,
What happened there was I was at a Edge Media conference in 2009, the AV conference, and I met Adrian Gilbert. Now, Adrian Gilbert co-wrote one of Wilson and Blackett's books. This is The Holy Kingdom, all about the two King Arthurs and where King Arthur's buried. Very good book if you want to go and find out about it. The Holy Kingdom tells you the truth about King Arthur. Now, I was fascinated by what Adrian Gilbert told me, and he said that, well, Wilson and Blackett are living up there in the northeast near where you live. So as soon as I got back from the conference, I went round to try and find Alan Wilson. Now, I tried to ring him, no answer on the phone.